In episode 1 of Mythic Quest, we learned that Mythic Quest is the highest grossing video game of all time, and they're planning on releasing their first expansion pack, Raven's Banquet. Now, the folks behind the game are its creator, Ion Grimm, its executive producer, David Brittlesby, its lead engineer, Poppy Lee, and the head of monetization, Brad Bakshi. And then, of course, there's the head writer, C.W. Longbottom. And as Ion, David, Poppy, Brad, and CW are sitting in a meeting discussing the new items that will be in the game, Poppy shows them the shovel she's developing, which doesn't really fit into the game. And Ion is trying to figure out why exactly it's in the game, but it's in the game basically because it's Poppy's idea. The user won't be able to use it as a weapon, but what the user will be able to do is change the landscape of the game with the shovel. Although Ion doesn't think it's cool and he wants to tinker with it. Now, one person noticeably absent from this meeting is the executive producer David Brittlesby, who has just hired a new intern, a girl by the name of Joe. And when David rushed in the meeting, he finds that it just ended and there's a possibility that the launch could be delayed because Ion wants to tinker with the shovel. Ion reassures him that the launch will not be delayed, but that is David's biggest concern. But Poppy's biggest concern at the moment is the shovel getting tinkered with. So she wants to go behind Ion's back and she heads to Brad, the head of monetization, and wants to leak the shovel to a very popular YouTube streamer. She figures that once the shovel gets leaked, the audience will love it, and then Ion will have no choice but to keep it in the game the way it is. And Brad loves the idea. So they leaked the shovel to a YouTube streamer named PootyShoe, who they absolutely hate. This kid's a 14-year-old asshole. And to Poppy's surprise, he hates the shovel. To make matters worse for Poppy, Ion's big thing right now is to try to make that shovel a weapon. And his biggest concern at the moment is TTP, time to penis. Basically meaning, if you give somebody an item like that, how long is it going to take for them to start drawing dicks? So Poppy puts a workaround that won't allow them to draw dicks in the game, and that's one of the issues that PootyShoe had, is that he couldn't draw a dick. Or shovel a dick. So that plan to go behind Ion's back did not work. And Brad, the head of monetization, figured it wouldn't work the whole time, but he's decided to try to save the shovel by creating a very expensive loot crate where the shovel will be featured with like a slutty goblin. And Poppy's pissed off because she feels like Brad just sent her to PootyShoe so that the shovel would be panned, and now she's forced to create this loot crate that she doesn't want to create with the shovel that is her creation. Now, a short time after this, with all the infighting that's going on regarding the shovel, the head of HR calls a meeting because she's basically being treated like a therapist, and she's sick of it. She wants them all to hash out their differences, and in this meeting, you have two game testers named Rachel and Dana. And Rachel's pissed off because she feels like her voice isn't heard enough, and Dana doesn't really care, but they start chiming in, which pisses off Ion, but also starts more infighting around the group and what they should do about the shovel. And during this infighting, you find out that C.W. Longbottom, the head writer, won an award, but he won an award in 1979 for science fiction writing, and he was actually discovered by Ion selling chicken at a country fair. And the testers are kind of annoyed by him. And David, the executive producer, is annoyed because Joe is supposed to be his assistant, but she's become Ion's assistant because she's kind of obsessed with him in a very creepy way. Finally, the argument hits a crescendo and Poppy says he's going to want to delay the game, and Ion says, yeah, no, I'm going to need a little more time with it. And this is going to force David to actually make a decision between Poppy and Ion. Delay the game or don't. And after being pressured by both sides, he decides to lock the game and put it out immediately. He's not going to allow Ion to delay the game anymore, and Ion is pissed. So that night, Ion proceeds to continue to work on the game, but Poppy, being the head engineer, got a notice saying somebody was working on the game, and when she goes into the office, she finds Ion there, having really no clue what he's doing. She explains that she just wanted this one thing, and he's not allowing her to have it, which Ion says, this whole game is your thing. But she doesn't agree. She says, no, this is your vision. I'm basically the brush, and you're the painter. I'm nothing more than a tool to you. And Ion admits that he wishes he didn't need Poppy, but he does, because while he tells her what to paint, she's not only the brush, she's also the painter as well. And he goes on to tell her that he doesn't know why he knows this, but he just knows that this shovel could be the coolest thing in the world if she just allows it. So Poppy reluctantly gives him the okay to change the shovel and make it a, quote, badass shovel. The next day, they release Raven's Banquet, and they're all waiting on bated breath for PootyShoe's review, and it comes out 4 buttholes. And anything over 2 buttholes is absolutely incredible, and they just got 4 buttholes, and the entire office is freaking out. For the last 2 years, Mythic Quest has been teasing this character, the Masked Man, and they keep saying they're going to reveal him, but they haven't done so yet. And the public is getting pretty restless about this. So in episode 2, the creative team has a meeting to figure out what they're exactly going to do about the Masked Man. Brad figures this is a great time to unveil the Masked Man and tie him in with his casino that he's building, but Poppy is totally against the casino. She just thinks it's a complete money grab and has nothing really to do with the actual game itself. And their argument about this leads to Poppy saying, you know, we don't need the casino and we don't need you. To which Brad says, okay, and he walks out. So the rest of the meeting is imploring Ion and CB to let them know who the Masked Man is, and they said years ago that they had an idea of who it would be, but they don't, and they come clean about this. Their meeting is interrupted, however, by Joe, who comes in and says, "We have a problem," because she took it upon herself to send Pooty Shoe a meme basically telling him to kill himself, and he's not too happy about that, and he just told his 10 million subscribers about this. It's just not the best look when you tell a 14-year-old kid to go kill himself, so now he's rethinking if he even wants to play the game or not, and that's a problem for Ion. So he tells her, go de-escalate the situation, and the group continues to talk about what to do about the masked man. But shortly after that, their meeting is once again interrupted by Joe, who says that Pooty has made a new video. And in this video, Pooty says, "Well, they won't reveal who the masked man is, I'll reveal who Ion Grimm is. Did you know he even sued his own father?" And Ion is shocked about this and says, "Who even told him about that?" And Joe says, "Well, I did, because it's such a badass thing to do." And he says, "I didn't sue my own dad. I countersued him because he was trying to take my company from me." And Joe goes, "Oh, okay, so then your dad's a badass." But Ion says, "No one's a badass in this situation, Joe." But the story about Ion and his dad have given CB an idea about who the masked man could be. The masked man can be the father of a new character, a new hero. And Ion goes, "So basically just like Star Wars." But CB's never seen Star Wars. Don't get me wrong. He knows what Star Wars is, but the 70s were so hazy, he never saw it. Ion likes the idea and says, okay, now we need a Death Star, but CB has no idea what that is. So to get him up to speed, Ion and CB go and head off to watch the movie. At this point, David has noticed that Brad has literally picked up all of his items and left the office. And while Poppy's all for this, when they get to work the next day, everybody notices that Brad has opened up their entire store for free. He's also taken it upon himself to send all the coders home, saying that if Brad's not there, well, then they can't pay for you guys either, so just go home. So at this point, Brad is giving out free items to his players, and they have no coders to fix that issue because he sent them home, and now Poppy and David are freaking out a little bit. They're trying to get in touch with Brad, but do so in a way that doesn't admit that they actually need him, which is the problem. And while figuring out how to do this, they notice that he's actually in a meeting with Ion and CB, and they head on in there, and initially they start screaming at him until he reveals that he reinstated all of the prices and put it back to the way it was. And in that meeting, they came to an agreement where the casino will be called the Masked Man's Hall of Games and Chance. They will also unveil a new character called the White Knight, and it is set that the Masked Man and the White Knight will eventually fight. The Masked Man's identity will be revealed at the casino, so it's really a win-win for everybody, and they need to get on this casino project quickly. In episode 3, David is called down to the basement to meet with Sue, and he grabs Joe to bring her along. And Sue is basically the buffer between MQ's players and the people who actually make the game. So this woman deals with a lot of shit. And she lets David know that MQ is going to be on the cover of this very popular gaming magazine. And initially, David is thrilled until he learns the reason why. It's because MQ is the #1 game for white supremacists. And this is a slight issue with David. So David calls Poppy to a meeting, but she doesn't really want to go because she's about to unveil her new feature called Dinner Party. Even though the concept of a dinner party kind of goes over her head since she's never been to one, and it becomes obvious of that. But the whole premise of it is you can do a meetup, basically, with a bunch of your friends in the game. So Joe is sent down to go grab Poppy, who is in the middle of this dramatic reveal, and Joe takes it upon herself to just press the button and release it. And in this meeting, you got Brad, Joe, David, Poppy, and CB. And initially, they're talking about what to do with the Nazis, but then it gets brought up, maybe we keep the Nazis because everybody needs a bad guy. Although David is firm in his stance, let's get rid of the Nazis. David wants CB to write up an apology, and all that Poppy's concerned about is dinner party, although nobody cares with this Nazi issue going on. And then Brad brings up the point of, well, how's it going to look if we start kicking out the Nazis? I mean, where do we draw the line here? It's just not going to look great if a straight white man is the one who's making the decisions on who stays and who goes. So they decide to get a diverse group together to figure out who stays and who goes. They want some females on this panel other than Joe, so they go to the testers and they get Dana, but of course, Rachel doesn't want to feel left out and she wants to come too, although they let her know, your demographic's kind of been filled. And that's when she pipes up, all right, well then fine, I'm gay. And since they don't have any knowingly gay people on their panel, they decide to let her stay. So this panel includes Brad, David, Joe, Rachel, and Dana. And after going through a ton of groups, including Patriots fans, people that quote the mask, 9/11 truthers, I mean, it really runs the gamut. But they realized that they would be kicking out 90% of their game players. Now, CW has returned with the apology that he's written up for the company, and they realized they could use his age demographic in this meeting. So what they decided to do is do a March Madness type bracket of all of these groups to figure out who to kick out. Now, they're not the only ones that are trying to figure out what to do about the Nazis, because Ion is also trying to figure out what to do about them, and he's decided to take a different approach. He's trying to put things in the game that they would gravitate towards to flush them out. Things that are really close to Nazi symbols, but not quite. And he's actually gone so far to have a programmer named Melissa, who's kind of Poppy's rival, put the Nazi salute in the game to which they can say it's a glitch. And Poppy is very against this, but so is Sue from the basement. At this point, she just doesn't want any more articles from any more magazines, and she just wants the Nazis gone. And as Ion is trying to think of a better way to do this, he gets an alert on his phone that's saying that Poppy has gone live introducing Dinner Party. And it's a really painful introduction to Dinner Party, but she has set up a dinner party for a peaceful protest against the Nazis. And the peaceful protest using Dinner Party seems to have worked because a lot of people did show up, and Poppy's patting herself on the back. But Melissa says, hold on a second, I'm watching another dinner party, and it's the Nazis coming to slaughter you guys. And since Poppy's group is a peaceful protest and they didn't have any weapons, they get slaughtered pretty quickly. But because of this, and because of Dinner Party, they were able to figure out who the Nazis were, and they only thought they had a few, but they had something like 4,000 of them. So while initially Poppy is down about Dinner Party, Ion lets her know that no, it was actually great. I'm able to put all of them in an echo chamber. And as they're celebrating this, Brad comes in from the conference room and says, you know what, I've decided to kick out all of the Nazis, but they've already taken care of it. They put all the Nazis on a separate server and are literally letting them yell into a black hole without them knowing it. In episode 4, huge news in the gaming community as Pooty Shoe has quit MQ for their main competition. And to make matters worse, he's already given the main competitions game 4.5 B-holes. And this could not come at a worse time because it's coming right before StreamerCon, a huge con in the gaming community. So all the thinking heads at MQ are panicking because they need a streamer ASAP to promote their game. So Brad, Ion, Poppy, and Dana all head to StreamerCon to try to find somebody to replace Pooty Shoe. The first guy they have in mind is a kid named LOL Trevor, and Brad's plan is to go in, offer him $5,000, and then leave. He figures there's no way he can't take that. But when he goes to meet with the kid lets him know, yeah, I'm not really into money, I'm more of into percentages. And he ends up switching Brad's power play on him by giving him an ultimatum, and then he walked out. Trevor figures, if I'm selling your weapons in the game, I want a percentage of that. But that doesn't really work for MQ, and that meeting did not go as planned. So with LOL Trevor out of the way, now they continue to look, and Poppy thinks she's found somebody, but when she offers her the job, she soon finds out that she has less than 200 subscribers. And Poppy thought this girl had a huge line at her booth, but in reality, it was just the bathroom line. After she's walking back from giving a job, but then taking the job offer away, she runs into the competition's Ion Grimm and a guy named Dan Williams. And initially, Poppy tells him to go fuck himself. But he's a huge fan of her work, and he decides to give her his business card and say, hey, if you're ever thinking about switching teams, let me know, we can talk. Initially, Poppy doesn't want the card, but Dan insists, saying that there could be an opening for a new creative director and she'd be perfect for it. So she takes it. She then meets up with Brad and Ion. And Ion's solution to the streamer situation is a 45-year-old guy with an ankle monitor who thinks that Ion is a genius. And Brad's solution is to buy a computerized girl at a one-time fee that they can manipulate. She's controllable, she's manageable, she never changes the prices. It's actually pretty genius, yet kind of unethical because of the whole, she's fake thing. Now, neither of those options really work for Poppy, and she's frustrated and walks off and finds Dana playing MQ. She doesn't really understand it because Dana can play MQ at work. Why are you playing it at StreamerCon? But either way, Dana's got a huge crowd around her. So Poppy rushes back to Ion and Brad and says, I found our streamer. And initially, they think that she's talking about herself, but she says, no, idiots, it's Dana. She's perfect for it. She loves the game. She gets it. She's a girl, but Brad says, no, it would never work because she's too hot. Poppy brings to the point that your person isn't an actual person. She begs them to come with her and watch Dana play, but they just walk away. So the group heads back to the office without a streamer, and the office has been pretty interesting without the leadership there. David is in charge and having to walk around this group of girls who want to code, and that hasn't been going so hot. Right off the bat, he had Joe talk to him, but that was a disaster. Then he had him talk to Melissa, the coder from downstairs, and she was equally as bad. She basically told him that they'll work harder for less money, and the girl to their left and their right is not their friend, but their competition. Then he had them go downstairs and talk to Sue in the basement, and that seemed to be going okay until one of the girls said, I want your job, and Sue said, no, you don't. And then David remembers that we have two girls that actually test the game, so he heads up there. But with Dana going to StreamerCon, CW has come in, and CW and Rachel have bonded over the game and end credit scenes. And when the girls come in to talk to Rachel, the conversation between CW and Rachel is extremely uncomfortable because it's taken way out of context, and David ushers them out of there quickly. So at the exact moment that he's about to end the tour and send these girls on their way home, Ion, Poppy, Brad, and Dana end up coming back. And David goes, this is great. Okay, you guys can talk to Poppy, our head engineer. But Poppy ends up passing the torch over to Dana. And Dana is exactly what the group wanted. She tells him how cool it is to work there, how awesome it is to be a girl who plays video games. And that's when the light bulb goes on for Ion and Brad, and they say, oh my god, Dana's the streamer. And they don't give Poppy a lick of credit for this, which infuriates her. So she goes in the office and calls Dan Williams and sets up a meeting with him. Episode 5 doesn't really have anything to do with Mythic Quest itself, but it's a really nice self-contained episode. So real quickly, back in the 90s, this couple ended up meeting at a game store because the girl couldn't find any games that she actually wanted to play, so the guy ended up suggesting, hey, why don't you create your own? And they did. They created this game called A Dark Quiet Death, where The premise of the game was you never win, and you just push the monsters back with flashlights. And this game was a massive success. And this is after they had gotten rejected time and time and time again by gaming companies, until a company in Montreal, the same company that has Mythic Quest, ended up giving them a chance. So immediately they tried a sequel, and the more and more sequels and the more down the road they get, the more far away they got from the original point and message of the game. It ended up fracturing the relationship of the couple until finally she ended up leaving. And it didn't take long for the guy to be pushed out as well. And years down the line, they realized that they probably should have listened to each other a little bit more and probably stuck to their guns. And he, Doc, had more regrets than she, Beans, in the whole situation. But once again, the whole tie-in was the fact that they are owned by the same company. In episode 6, Poppy is awoken at work and she wants to go home and take a shower before she meets with Dan Williams. But unfortunately she can't, because one of the coders found a problem that the masked man is giving out tons of free loot, and he's costing the company thousands of dollars a minute. She goes and tells David about this, but David wants to go and tell Ion, and she says, don't do that. He'll make a mountain out of a molehill. Just let me handle it. In the meantime, what you can do is follow the masked man around and attack him, because when he's attacked, he can't give out free loot. And as she's talking to David, she's breaking out in stress hives. So she's dealt with David, and now she has to deal with Ion and distract him. And she puts that tall programmer named Paul, he's the one who actually found the glitch about the masked man, she puts him up in the main office to kind of intimidate Ion, because this guy towers over Ion. And this plan by Poppy does in fact work. As Ion is sitting in his office, Joe is imploring him to go out there and fight him. But Ion says, no, you know what? In my younger days, I might have done that. But you know what? Here, we're all adults and we're working in an office. I'm not going to do that. Plus, he can't be that perfect. But in fact, no, he is. Still, Joe does not give up and wants Ion to take back his masculinity. But now with Ion and David preoccupied at the time, Poppy heads on now to her meeting while also trying to fix the issue of the masked man. Now, Brad and Dana in the meantime have started the streaming, and they've overtaken CW's office to do so. But in the middle of their test run, CW walks in the shot, and that's not good because they're trying to keep this thing under wraps that she's actually an inside mole for MQ. But now that CW's here, Brad tries to convince CW to write a backstory for Dana, but CW doesn't want to do it. So Brad gets the idea of just getting a machine to do it. And as CW is sitting in Brad's office, since Brad overtook his office, Brad wheels in the machine and explains how this thing wrote a backstory for Dana in about 3 seconds. And here it is. Here's the script. And much like Ion earlier in the episode, now CW is the one feeling insecure. But initially, CW tries to convince himself that a machine could not do what he does. And now that Dana is busy streaming, she doesn't have time to actually test the games. So they brought in a guy from the 3rd floor to do that and replace her. And Rachel is not happy about this because this guy is truly the worst. He's the guy on Facebook who says, actually, and then tells you why you're wrong. Eventually, she ends up flipping out on him after he has the audacity to say, look, I don't want to sleep with you. And she says, I'm gay. And he says, well, I bet I can turn you. And that's when she just loses it on him about how he's the worst person ever. So Poppy isn't the only one in the office that is stressed out, but she's arrived at her meeting and she's busy trying to figure out the issue with the masked man until she gets a FaceTime from David saying, don't worry, look, he stopped giving out loot. Maybe the bug fixed itself. And she says, the bugs don't fix themselves, David. But the conversation is cut short when Dan Williams shows up to give her the tour of the place. During the tour, Dan is explaining where she would sit and how they do business, and it's completely different from MQ. And she's realizing more and more as she's talking to Dan that the way they do business over at MQ is completely ass backwards and overall just not really productive. She also notices as she's leaving that the stress hives have gone away, and that's a good sign. Now, one of the examples of ass backwards practice at MQ is the fact that 2 members of the male community have their pride taken from them. And Ion is going down to the gym and just starts pumping iron to try to get that masculinity back, but Paul shows up. And they start getting into a pissing contest about their back injuries and how it happened, but Paul wins because his back injury occurred during a war, while Ion's occurred when his motorcycle fell over him on a stoplight. And when Paul picks him up like a little child to help him with his back injury, Ion really feels emasculated. CW, on the other hand, still can't believe that a machine could do what he does until Dana comes in crying about the script that he quote-unquote wrote her. And that's when he realizes maybe this machine can in fact replace him. So he wheels the machine into his office where Brad is waiting, and he says, look, if this thing is going to replace me, it might as well share an office with me. And Brad says, CW, that thing is an air conditioner. The story that I gave Dana was actually one of your stories from the 80s. How do you not remember that? And he goes, well, I mean, the 80s were kind of foggy. But this reinvigorates CW, the fact that he is a great writer, and he agrees to write a backstory for Dana. When Poppy returns from a meeting with Dan Williams, she walks into the opposite of his place of business, a completely dysfunctional group bashing that air conditioner a la Office Space style. And she freaks out on David for allowing this to take place. She asks about an update about the masked man. He says, oh, don't worry about it. He's gone. He vanished. And she says, that's a problem. He just vanished? So she goes to look in the code and realizes, oh my God, we've been hacked. In episode 7, David and Poppy are freaking out a little bit about the security breach, but Ion doesn't think it's a big deal, and David says, of course it's a big deal. But Ion brings up the point that companies in the past couple of years have had their security breached, and nobody seems to care. He then goes on to list a bunch of companies that, sure enough, we do still shop with, so he is correct. But when Poppy continues to freak out, David and Ion take that opportunity to actually mess with her. And they don't know this, but they're pissing her off so bad that she storms out of the meeting and calls Dan Williams and accepts his offer to go work for the competition. Now, that's not the only bad thing going on at Mythic Quest that day, because over on the streamer side, Dana is struggling. She can't figure out why she only has 49 subscribers. But when Rachel comes in, she says, well, this isn't you. You're wearing lipstick. I mean, where are your glasses? Dana says, Brad thought they were too dorky. And Rachel says, well, they are dorky, but they're you. Try them out. So she takes Rachel's advice. She loses the lipstick, she puts on her glasses, and sure enough, in about a day, she has 1 million subscribers. And I feel like this is a good time to remind you that I'm also wearing glasses and no makeup, so hit that subscribe button. All right, shameless plug over. Now, Ion is still trying to figure out what to do about the masked man, so he goes live to all of the players and reveals what happened. He admits that their security was breached, but then he challenges the masked man to a duel in the masked man's Games of Hall and Chance. And nobody knew about this, and David in particular is really freaking out about this, and his phone is ringing off the hook from his bosses in Montreal wondering what the hell is going on. Although David's not answering because he doesn't really know what to tell them. Now, one person noticeably not freaking out is Poppy, because she doesn't care. She's leaving in a couple weeks for the competition, so she's just letting everything fly off her back. So when Ion asks her to motion capture a cutscene of him revealing who the masked man is, instead of getting mad at him, she accepts the offer. David comes down to the motion capture area and wants to know about what Ion is actually planning to do and tells him how bad of an idea it is and can't believe that Poppy isn't agreeing with it, but they say, David, it's not a bad idea. Actually, it's pretty genius because this guy hasn't signed on in about a week or two. So hopefully this will draw him out because he has a massive ego and will be able to get his IP server and track down who it is. But even with that explanation, it's not stopping the calls from Montreal, which is stressing out David even more. After David storms off, Poppy asks Ion, hey, by the way, you are actually good at this game, right? And he says, yeah, I'm not one of these absentee owners who created the game and doesn't play it. I'm great at it. But in fact, he sucks at it. Because when he started playing, all you had was a loincloth and a dagger, and now they have armor and spells and all this crap. He doesn't know how to use any of it. So now Poppy needs to train him because he can't really afford to get embarrassed on a national stage where if he does lose, he probably loses his job as well. So the day the fight comes and everybody in the gaming industry is pumped for this showdown. Rachel is watching it via Dana's Twitch stream. David, Joe, and CW are watching it from a supply closet where they're drinking homemade alcohol from CW's stash. Sue's watching it in the basement along with Paul, who's been banished there by Ion. And Poppy's watching it right next to Ion, where as soon as the masked man enters, she'll try to track down his IP server and figure out who this guy is that hacked them. And Ion's plan worked because after he enters the arena, the masked man soon follows. They start fighting, and Ion does really well. Unfortunately for him, the masked man has all of their potions, armor, spells, and he's just too much for Ion. And right as Ion's about to die, he just strips down to nothing but a loincloth. Oh wait, the loincloth's gone as well. And challenges the masked man to a duel, just dagger versus dagger. And since that's Ion's strength, he ends up beating the masked man, and at this point, Poppy has located his IP address and knows who it is. And when they do the big reveal, it is revealed to be Pooty Shoe, who was the hacker. As soon as the fight's over, Montreal is calling David, and now he finally picks up. And at first, he's apologizing, but then it might be the alcohol, it might be Joe telling him to back creative, but he sticks up for himself and says, you know what? Nobody else would have allowed this, but I did. I back creative. And because of that, we probably had our best day in MQ history. So if you guys can suck it, and then he hangs up, and then immediately throws up because of what he just said. Back over where Ion was playing, though, everybody's celebrating on stage, and they're imploring Poppy to come on stage with them, but she just gets a text from Dan Williams that says, I bet you can't wait to get out of there, see you in a couple weeks, and now she's rethinking her decision to leave MQ. Episode 8, Poppy has really been delaying giving Ion her 2 weeks notice, and Dan from Cold Alliance wants to know when exactly she's planning on starting with the company. So with the pressure from Dan, she says, okay, I'll let him know today. But when she goes into Ion's office to let him know, he seems depressed and asks her if she can take a ride with him. And now she's in the car with Ion, having no idea where they're going. She's trying to quit, but Ion cuts her off and reveals that his actual name is Ian. And his dad is named Ian, but he hates his dad so much that he just started calling himself Ion, and it's stuck. And he's never revealed that to anybody, and he doesn't really know why he's revealing it to Poppy, but then he thanks her for all she's done for him and lets her know that even though he doesn't say it all the time, he really does appreciate her. And this couldn't come as a worse time as Poppy is trying to quit the company. They eventually get to a diner, which Poppy thinks is great because she's hungry, but Ion says, no, I need you to stay here. I need to go in there and do what I've been putting off for a long time. Just sit tight. And when Ion heads inside of the diner, there's Pooty Shoe waiting for him, and Ion says, Brendan? And Pooty says, "Hello, Dad." Ion starts asking his son how his life's going, but Pooty doesn't really feel like making amends at the moment. He's still pretty pissed at Ion for just taking off and leaving him for 10 straight years. Ion lets him know, "Man, when you started playing Mythic Quest, your channel started blowing up, and I just didn't know how to handle it." But this confrontational attitude from Pooty leads to a blow up in the diner where Pooty just says, "I don't ever want to see you again," and walks out. Now, while Poppy was waiting for Ion in the diner, she called back Dan Williams and said, "Hey, thank you for the offer, but I talked it out with Ion and we're seeming to come to an understanding, and I just can't accept your job offer at this time." But as soon as she gets off the phone, she gets a knock at the window, and it's Ion's ex, who's also Pooty mom, asking if she's the new one. Poppy lets her know, "No, me and him aren't dating," but then she says, "I'm just going to let you know right now, what he does is, he will shine a light on you, and you will think that you are the most important person in the world, until he shines that light somewhere else, usually on himself. And when you're just about to leave, he'll shine it back on you to just keep you there as an emotional support animal." And that's when Poppy thinks she just got played by Ion, because that made a whole lot of sense. So she frantically calls Dan Williams back and says, "Hey, ignore my previous call. I can't wait to start working with you." Ion comes out of the diner and just wants to go home, and Poppy says, "Do you have anything to tell me?" And he doesn't, because he's just depressed and wants to go home. But she says, "Why didn't you tell me that Pooty was your son? I had to find out from your ex." And after the emotional roller coaster that he just went through with his son, he's now going to deal with Poppy freaking out at him for being a quote-unquote emotional support animal. And then she drops the bombshell, "You know what, Ion? I'm quitting. How do you feel about that? I'm quitting and I'm going to your competitor." And Ion doesn't lose his cool. He just looks at her kind of dejected and says, "If that's what you want to do, I can't stop you." Poppy isn't willing to just let this conversation go, though, and she says how much she hates Ion and to get in the car because she'll drive them back. So in a period of about 5 minutes, 2 different people told Ion that they hate him. Now, back at the office, it's been a pretty busy day. Dana asks Brad if she can just have some time off from streaming because she feels burnt out, but he says no, because I need you to push my new item. It's this sword that costs $250,000, and while they don't think anyone's going to buy it, it's something that people can look forward to and chase. And as they're discussing the sword, CW walks in wearing Crocs and a masked man shirt, and Brad makes mention that he sold a shit ton of those after the duel. And CW says that he's going to now embrace mediocrity, because while everybody liked that the reveal was Pooty he just thought it was mediocre at best. But since it's so popular, he might as well start embracing everything that's mediocre now. And it's kind of clear that CW is going through something at the moment, but they're still trying to push that sword, so they push it to the side, and Dana goes live on her stream. And as Rachel is watching it, she can just tell that something is wrong with Dana, so she has a plan to sneak her out of the building after the stream without her bosses knowing and take her to an arcade just to blow off some steam and have some fun. After the stream, Brad walks into David's office, and David immediately congratulates him because somebody has bought that $250,000 sword. And while Brad should feel good, he doesn't, because he's like, these piece of shit sheiks and these rich bastards from Silicon Valley will just buy anything I throw out there. And he no longer feels the accomplishment of when something that he puts out there sells. And Joe is feeling the same thing after Ion picked Poppy to be his assistant, even though she's not his assistant at all. So David now feels like he needs to motivate the troops, and he shows them what he usually does. He sets a bunch of different tasks, and as he completes them, he gives himself a piece of a cookie. And initially, they think that's the stupidest idea in the world, until he starts asking them, "What do you want to accomplish today?" And Brad says, "Well, I guess I could do the naming rights for the Coliseum for about $1 million. And when Brad says, "Great, here's a piece of a cookie," now Joe actually wants some cookie, and now they're coming around to the whole cookie idea, because cookies are delicious. So now with that task crossed off the list, they need Dana to push this sponsorship idea, but they don't know where Dana is. And CW, who is watching television, lets them know that she left. So now Joe has the task of trying to find out where they are. And right after Joe leaves, Brad, David, and CW are sitting in a room, and David gets a text from Poppy telling him that Ion's son is Pooty and all of a sudden it just reinvigorates CW, who now no longer thinks that the storyline of the masked man being revealed to be Pooty sucks, because it's actually Ion's son, and he runs through the office screaming, "It's Ion's son." Now he loves the storyline. Joe does in fact find Dana and Rachel at the arcade and drags them back to the office, and when they get back, Brad lets her know that she needs to now push the naming rights for the Coliseum. And as Dana leaves to go stream, David lets Brad know that the guy who actually bought the sword wasn't some rich dude. It was some guy in a trailer park, and Brad says, "How can that be?" And David says, "I guess he just spent his life savings on it." And that is now Brad's motivation, to take your last dollar from you as a player. Not selling this stuff to rich people, because there's no fun in that, but actually taking the last penny that you own. And now Brad is insanely motivated. Dana, meanwhile, hops on the stream, but as soon as she hops on, she gets inundated with trolls in the chat saying that she works for MQ and she's nothing but a corporate shill. And unfortunately for Dana, it seems like the jig is up. When Poppy and Ion finally come back to the office, Poppy continues to rail into Ion, but then she gets a phone call from Dan Williams saying, "You know, I just don't think that this match is going to work with us. You're a little too volatile." And as Poppy is trying to walk back her previous phone calls that make her seem like she's crazy, it just isn't enough. And Dan Williams says, I'm sorry, but I have to take back the job offer. And Ion, who was listening to the entire conversation, says, hey, Pop, I'll see you inside. In the season finale of Mythic Quest, Ion pops into the office and he finds a depressed Poppy, and he's got a great idea for her. Blood Ocean, although he doesn't really know what Blood Ocean is yet. So Poppy says, figure out what Blood Ocean is, and then I'll worry about it. But Ion has another issue to worry about, because his staff has unionized and threatened to go on strike and has made Melissa their leader, after instead of getting a bonus, they just got an ice cream machine. So David, Ion, Brad, Poppy, they all meet late at night. And Ion asks what exactly do they want, and they just want to be paid for their overtime work. So David wants the thing to go away and wants to open up the books with Ion. But Ion says, yeah, I don't do books, and I don't do phones, and I don't do time. What I do is Blood Ocean. And then it hits Ion, an epiphany, if you will, that maybe the Blood Ocean is a potion. At this point, Poppy can't take it anymore. She's emotionally and physically exhausted. So Ion tells her to go home and get some sleep. So the next day, David meets with Melissa just to get all of her demands. And the only demand she has is that they get paid for overtime. That's it. And David's relieved, thinking that they were going to want some revenue sharing. And she says, can we get that? And David has this awkward pause, because David kind of sucks at this. And Melissa says, maybe you need Ion, which David takes as an insult, saying, why do you guys love Ion so much? And Melissa explains that it's because he's right. We need overtime to make the game great. We're not mad about working overtime. It's not like we want to work less. We just want to get paid for working more. And David thinks it's a really reasonable request and goes to call Montreal, but makes the women leave because he doesn't want them to see him like this. So Melissa and Joe leave the conference room, but Joe makes an announcement to the entire staff to take notice of what David is doing. David is calling Montreal and sticking up for their rights, until David comes out and says, they fired me. They don't really see this as a union issue. They see it as a David issue, and because of that, they let him go. He asks the employees if any of them are willing to walk out on his behalf to try to save his job, but none of them are willing to do that. Now, one employee that we haven't talked about is Dana, who went back on the stream to do a mea culpa, but it didn't go well. When they finally enabled the chat, it blew up with nasty comments, including her phone number, and her phone started ringing off the hook. It got to the point where Dana just decided to quit the stream. She thought she could go back to her testing job, but there's no job to go back to, and unfortunately, Dana is being escorted out of the building, and Rachel is beside herself at finding out this news. Rachel is frantically trying to save her job and runs down to HR to report the guy that she's working with, saying, well, he harassed me. Actually, he kind of did. He said that he wouldn't have sex with me. Does that count? And the head of HR says, no, actually, that's quite refreshing. He's not doing anything wrong. She then goes to Brad, asking if there's any way she can create a new job because she's blaming Brad on this. And Brad says, no, that's not really a thing. We're not creating a new job. We'd have to rearrange the budget and everything for that. Brad reminds Rachel that he gave her a dream job that Rachel agreed she should take. And that's when he realizes, oh my God, Rachel doesn't know how they found out that she was working for MQ. So he goes on the Reddit thread and shows her that one day when Dana was streaming, the users noticed that there was a glare in her glasses. And when they blew up the image, they saw the Nebula Award. And it didn't take long to figure out that the Nebula Award belonged to CW. CW works for MQ with Ion, and they tied it all together. And now Rachel is blaming herself, thinking that she's the reason why Dana's cover was blown. Now, Ion has no idea what's going on back at the office, because he spent all day trying to figure out what Blood Ocean is. He's gone even so far as to go to the beach, cut his hand, and start walking in the ocean, to which onlookers let him know he really shouldn't do that because he could get infected, to which he responded with, I don't do sick. And while Ion might not, his immune system does, and in fact, his finger does get infected. And after he leaves the hospital, he heads right to Poppy's and lets her know that he had an epiphany. Blood Ocean is an infection. It's a disease. And Poppy has to admit it's a pretty good idea. But when he tries to usher Poppy over to a workstation, she says, no, I can't do this anymore. And that's when he makes the analogy that Poppy and Ion are like the Beatles. They might fight, they might not always get along, but when they get together, they make amazing music. And she really likes that analogy until she gets compared to Ringo and not one of the better Beatles. She then loses it on Ion, saying that you're the creative director. That's why we're always held hostage and we do what you want to do. But you have no idea what's going on in your own company. Did you have any idea that David got fired? Did you know that your employees are about to mutiny on you? But you're so self-absorbed that you can't see that you're ruining this game just like you ruined your kid. And as soon as she says that, she knows that she messed up. She knows that she needs to walk that back. And Ion just slowly exits as Poppy is trying to apologize. But when he gets back to the car, he does see all these missed text messages from the office demanding to know where he is and trying to fill him in, saying that they needed him at that moment, and he was nowhere to be found. And because of all these missed text messages, it kind of proves Poppy right. So he ends up calling up Montreal, getting David his job back, getting the workers overtime pay, and even gets extra money in the budget that allows them to promote that annoying tester to some bullshit job and get Dana her job back as a tester. And when Poppy enters the office the next day, she's greeted by a bunch of happy employees. and she's ready to puke to find out that they're all praising Ion because he, quote, saved the day. But when she gets to Ion's office, she shows him what she'd been working on all night long. It's Blood Ocean, and it looks awesome. But then Ion says, well, there's one thing I want to tinker. And immediately Poppy starts criticizing him, and he cuts her off and says, I want you to be my co-creative director. He then goes over to a wall and shows her that the company that was there before them, a company that created a video game called A Dark and Quiet Death, the creators had carved their name into the wall. And Ion, when he got there, carved his name into the wall, and now he wants Poppy to do it so they can be one, and they can be a unified force. And after she does that, they go out and they make the announcement that Poppy Lee is now the co-creative director of Mythic Quest. And that is how Season 1 of Mythic Quest ends. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel, or at least give it 4 seconds of heavy thought. If you got this far, I assumed you like it, so hit that thumbs up. But if you thought it sucked at this point, there's a thumbs down button. Share this video if you know somebody that needs a refresher on Mythic Quest. And if you do leave a comment in the comment section, I try not to check them because, well, you saw what happened with Dana. But just know, I really do appreciate you guys checking this video out.